Okay, we're going to try to get through chapter 13 and 14 of Exodus today. We left off in chapter 12 last time, but we didn't get quite finished with it. So let me just finish this up. I think we left off at about verse 33. So let me just pick up from there. And this is, of course, this is right in the context of the Passover that we discussed last time and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. And we're going to talk some more about the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. In fact, we're going to see where we are in Exodus that we have three very important feasts or festivals that are initiated here. And we're going to read about the third one when we get to chapter 13. But probably the feast that receives the least attention is the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, but I'll submit to you, it really is one of the most important. And as we think about what it is and what it means, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we're going to read about it today, the question that comes to mind, when do we or should we as Christians celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread?
Communion.
Okay. Communion, that certainly is a remembrance of it, right? The Lord's Supper, when we eat the bread, that is symbolic of the unleavened bread. What did you start to say, Wanda?
Every day.
Every day. I think that's exactly right.
I missed it.
Well, I mean, you didn't miss it. I mean, you said communion, and we should have communion every day,
Well, that's
right?
true.
That's
Yes.
right. And why is it, explain, Wanda, why is it that we as Christians should celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread every day?
Well, we should keep sin out of our lives so that we're clean all the time.
That's right.
And I thought it was very fitting that this comes at the beginning of their year,
Yes.
too.
That's
As a
right.
reminder to keep yourself in the right relationship with the Lord.
That's right. It's not just the beginning of their year. The Lord said, this is really the beginning of your life. Well, I'm giving your life back to you. You were slaves now, and now you're going to be my people. You're going to be free people. And so you celebrate the Passover, and then you celebrate the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. And as we're going to see in a moment, they're also to celebrate. God said, as soon as you get to the Promised Land, you're going to celebrate the Feast of the First Fruits, and that's really what chapter 13 is about. It's not called the festival or the Feast of the First Fruits, but I think when we study later on, more details given in Leviticus and even in Deuteronomy about the festival of the Feast of the First Fruits, we're going to see that it really harkens back to what we have here. And so in these feasts, we have symbolized first in the Passover, we have a foreshadowing of what? In the Passover, the slaying of the Passover lamb.
Jesus on the cross.
Sure, that's right, the crucifixion, the sacrifice of Christ. In the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, what do we focus on?
And getting sin out of their lives and
Yep.
getting right with God. Because he's getting ready to
Right.
work in a mighty way. Already has started.
Pentecost.
That's right. Well, Pentecost comes a little bit later. It's a little bit different thing, but and they all are connected. But in the festival of the unleavened bread, we focus on the perfection of Christ, don't we? His sinless nature. But also, the feast or the festival of unleavened bread is about the sanctification process, isn't it? And I think it's very interesting that when we read about the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, when are they eating the unleavened bread? What are they doing at the time? Are they reclining at their tables? Are they taking it easy? Are they resting?
No, they're standing up ready to go,
Yeah.
ready to work.
In fact, we're going to see that this dough that they bake without leaven, they're even carrying it with them as they're leaving Egypt. That's kind of what they're eating on their way. And we're going to tie this in to something that God tells them while they're into their journey. And I've written it up on the board. The Lord will fight for you while you
Keep silent.
keep silent. Keep silent. Meaning what?
No grumbling or complaining.
Boy, once again, stop your grumbling and complaining. God is saying,
No fun at all.
yeah, right. That's kind of the fourth feast, the feast or the festival of grumbling and complaining, which they do a lot. In fact, we're going to jump forward
I do too.
Exodus 14:14 is what I've quoted. The Lord will fight for you while you keep silent. While you what? Shut up. Stop your whining and complaining and your grumbling. That comes in the context of what? If you look up, we're jumping ahead, we're jumping around, but if you look in verse 11 up there of chapter 14, it says, "Then they said to Moses, is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us in this way, bringing us out of Egypt? Is it not the word that we spoke to you in Egypt? We told you," in other words, saying, "Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." And what does God tell them through Moses? He says, "Shut up. Stop your whining and your complaining." He says, "The Lord will fight for you when you do what? Keep silent." Instead of filling your mouth with grumbling and complaining, you should be filling your mouth with what?
Praise and
Pray.
thankfulness for them.
That's right. And the unleavened bread. You should fill your mouth with unleavened bread. Every time, this is a lesson for all of us. In fact, as I was studying this week, a couple of questions came up about this. And one of the questions was, what does it take to reduce you to grumbling and complaining?
Well, let's go back and let's
right.
kind of look at it from the other side.
Okay.
The people were out there, they didn't have no water and everything. And they were getting mighty thirsty.
Yeah, but this is even before that.
Strike the rock to
Right.
get the water. Now, what was they supposed to do? Be quiet? What would have happened? I know, but we're human.
That's it. That's exactly right. And the grumbling and the complaining is a sign of our humanness, no doubt.
Why didn't he just go ahead and give them the water?
Well, that is an excellent question, Tommy. I mean, and what led up to this, the account that I just read in 11 and 12, that's even before they got thirsty. What's going on there is they have been freed from their slavery. They're taken out into the wilderness, and God says, move in this direction. And he moves in the direction of what? Basically, towards the sea. And the Egyptian army is coming towards it. And rather than acknowledge the fact that, hey, God has delivered us before, God delivered us through 10 plagues. He delivered us from the death angel. He's taken us out of Egypt. Now, here we are, and the Egyptian army is bearing down on us. That's when they start grumbling, they complain. They say, Moses, we told you earlier we didn't really want to leave Egypt. We should have stayed there. Why are you bringing us out here? Is it because there weren't enough graves there? They started grumbling and complaining. Was God testing them? Absolutely he was. Does God continue to test us? Yes. Does God, in the midst of the test, does he expect us to grumble and complain or to have faith? Does he expect us to fill our mouths with words of complaint or to fill our mouths with the unleavened bread? I'll submit to you it's the latter. Now, Tommy, I'm not pointing at you, I'm pointing at me. Because, what is it, I asked the question, what does it take to reduce you to grumbling and complaining? What does it take me? Well, when things don't go my way, right? All right. When things aren't going the way I want them to go, I start grumbling and complaining. I may have a reason to grumble and complain, but do I have a right to grumble and complain? Tell me. What were you going to tell me? You're going to tell me, quit your whining. That's what she's going to say. Stop whining. Keep silent. That's right. So is, as Tommy pointed out, is that the natural human tendency?
You have to go back to Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Adam was whistling at first in the garden.
Yeah.
Then it said you're going to have to work by the sweat of your brow, and that brings along a lot of problems. You worry about things
That's right. That's right.
that's happening. So they were carrying that with them too.
Yeah. But I want you to think about that. Think about that. Personalize it to yourself. You don't have to give us the answer. But think about it. What does it take to reduce you to grumbling and complaining?
The next minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always find something to grumble and complain about, can't you? Here's another question that I saw in what I was studying. How long can you go without complaining about something? You ever tried that?
It's starting if you come in contact with people or whatever.
Yeah.
Another human being.
I have to give Troy some brownie points there. He is the most patient man I've ever seen in my life. He don't complain a lot.
Out loud.
Out loud, yeah. And never in 42 years will he look at me and argue with me. You walk away. Come on, let's fight. He will not do it.
Well,
We
well,
like
good
we're
for
gonna
you.
lose anyway.
Good
It's
for
a
you.
lost cause.
Well, he already knows he done lost that battle.
Yeah.
That's
That's a lost cause.
That's what the plan
Why make it worse?
But you know, in Exodus 14:14, we have it really, it's a statement from God that comes through Moses, but it's also a challenge, and it's also a choice. That we're confronted, when we are confronted with circumstances about which we would grumble or complain, God says, you have a choice, all right? If you want me to fight for you, then what?
You gotta listen.
Then shut up.
Shut up.
If you want to fight your own battle, go ahead. Just start grumbling and complaining, and I'll back off and let you do whatever you're going to do. Do your grumbling and your complaining and your snorting and whatever you're going to do, and you're whining and you're crying, and you can just spend some time with your own little pity party. But when you're ready to keep silent, and when you're ready to eat some unleavened bread, that's when I will fight the battle for you.
Was he gonna go ahead and bring them on over there and let Moses hit the rock and the water come out if they had just been quiet?
What you think if they wouldn't have complained, that God would have let them die? I don't think so. I think that God had a plan for them. And did God put them into circumstances that would incite them to grumble or complain or lose faith? Absolutely. God didn't have to do it this way. In fact, we're going to see that God could have led the people. As soon as Pharaoh said, get out of here, God could have led them directly into the promised land. But he didn't. He had some work to do on them. He knew that they needed some work. Why? Because they had this propensity to not exercise faith, but to grumble and complain, and they needed some work. Now, does that sound familiar? Does any of us need that kind of work? Have any of us gotten past the point of grumbling or complaining? I don't think so. Maybe Troy.
Too many,
Maybe.
too many agitators. You ever heard a sermon on agitators?
They call it drama today.
Agitator, somebody that's gonna,
Yeah.
somebody in the crowd that's gonna be the agitator.
It seems like I've always got some agitator in my life. And a lot of times they're either carrying a briefcase or wearing a black robe. But agitators come in all different shapes and sizes and forms, don't they? And we all have agitators in our lives. You ever think there's going to be a time in your life where God removes all the agitators? Both living and unliving, animate and inanimate agitators?
Wouldn't be nobody there.
Glorified,
Yeah, it'd be a very lonely place.
Heaven.
Yeah, that's right. That's where it is.
glorified body.
That's right. But, still, that is a tremendous lesson for us to learn. And I want you to think about that. What does it take to reduce you to grumbling and complaining? Just things not going my way. Sometimes when my baseball team loses, even something as simple as that, I grumble and complain.
Crank your car every morning.
Yeah, there you go.
Head out down the road.
I get up and my back hurts. Well, that's something to complain about. Or I get up and, it's raining when I want it to be sunshine. What do I need to learn to do? Just shut up. Stop whining. Doggone it, Eat some of the unleavened bread. Fill your mouth with unleavened bread, meaning what? The praise, the worship.
Praise.
Just God's word,
Let's count our blessings.
That's right. In the book of Psalm, God repeats, if the children of Israel would have just opened their mouth, or if we would just open our mouths, he will fill it. All we have to do is just depend upon him. But rather than allowing the Lord to fill our mouths, we often fill our own mouths with what? With grumbling and complaining, doing exactly the wrong thing.
I wanted some butter on my bread.
There you go. That's right. You want some butter on your unleavened bread. A little bit of jelly too, don't we all? All right. Let me read and we'll work our way through this. And the Egyptians urged the people of Israel to send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, so they grabbed on their dough with their kneading bowls, bound up their clothes on their shoulders. Now the sons of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, for they had requested from the Egyptians articles of silver and articles of gold and clothing, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have their request. Thus the children of Israel plundered the Egyptians. Now the sons of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, aside from the children. So the 600,000 men, that's the count. Those are not just the men, those are the men of fighting age, typically. So they would have been men between roughly 18 and maybe their 30s or 40s. So the 600,000 didn't include the children, didn't include any of the women, the wives, didn't include any of the daughters, didn't include the mothers, didn't include the very old men. So that's why it is said that even the 600,000 is mentioned, is probably somewhere between 2 and 3 million people left. And how many came in? How many sons of Israel came in?
70.
70 come in and 2 to 3 million leave.
And it was just opposite of what he did to Pharaoh.
That's right. That's exactly right. They're winnowed down to
But
pretty
what
thin
I'm
ranks.
saying is, and you know, he told the Egyptians that he give them a favor to the, instead of hardening his heart, where Pharaoh, he hardened his heart to cause trouble and everything else. Here God told them to be favor with the Egyptians, give them everything.
Yep.
You know, they,
Yeah. So God provides for their needs, even hardly without asking. The children of Israel leave Egypt with silver and gold and articles of clothing. Verse 38, and a mixed multitude also went up with him, along with flocks and herds, a very large number of livestock. And they baked the dough which they had brought out of Egypt into cakes of unleavened bread. So that, again, they're eating it on the run. For it had not become leavened since they were driven out of Egypt and could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. Now the time that the sons of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years, and it came about at the end of 430 years to the very day that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. So there's no happenstance about it. It was the very day, 430 years. And as we calculated before, remember how many years it was that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob had lived in the land of Canaan before they went into slavery in Egypt?
400 years, wasn't it?
What's that?
400 years?
No, it was exactly half of the 430. They spent 215 years in the land of Canaan, and then they spent 430 years in slavery. So twice as long in slavery as they had spent in the land of Canaan. Okay, verse 42. It is a night to be observed for the Lord, for having brought them out of the land of Egypt. This night is for the Lord, to be observed by all the sons of Israel throughout their generations. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner is to eat of it, but every man's slave purchased with money, after you have circumcised him, then he may eat of it. A sojourner or a hired servant shall not eat of it. It is to be eaten in a single house. You are not to bring forth any of the flesh outside of the house, nor are you to break any bone of it. So here we have an additional ordinance that no bone of it is to be broken. What is that a foreshadow of?
Christ on the cross.
Yeah. In fact, John even recounts that. He brings this out when he tells the story of the crucifixion. There were two thieves on either side of Christ. It was getting close to the Passover, so the order was given to kill everybody, and they went to break the legs, and they did in fact break the legs of the two thieves on either side to hasten their death. But when they came to Jesus, what?
He was already
They found he was already dead, so his legs were not broken. And John said that is to fulfill what was said about the Passover, that no bone should be broken again, confirming that Christ is the Passover lamb. And of course, the children of Israel observed this rite of Passover, and with no breaking of bones for what, roughly 1,500 years. It says, all the congregation of Israel are to celebrate it, but if a stranger sojourns with you and celebrates the Passover of the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come to celebrate it. and he shall be like a native of the land, but no uncircumcised person may eat of it. Pause right there. That's significant. No uncircumcised person may partake of the Passover. What is significant about that? Think of it in the terms of what circumcision really means, the circumcised heart.
Blameless.
Those who are saved, accept Christ as their Savior. That's when we have communion, those who are,
That's right. And again, the nature of the uncircumcised heart, what did Paul say about it? We are the true circumcision who what? Who worship in the Spirit of God and glory in Christ Jesus and put no confidence in the flesh. So the uncircumcised heart is the one that puts confidence in the flesh, and therefore the one who has an uncircumcised heart has no desire for the Passover, right? Why? Because he or she believes he can save himself. But the one with a circumcised heart who puts no confidence in his flesh realizes what?
they can't.
That I cannot save myself, and I have a real need for a Savior. That's why I want to partake of the Passover.
Because of the sin in our lives.
Exactly. That's exactly right. The same law shall apply to the native as to the stranger who sojourns among you, that all the sons of Israel did so. They did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. And it came about on that same day that the Lord brought the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their hosts. All right, so now they're out. Chapter 13. Tommy, you want to pick up there, chapter 13, verse 1?
I'm gonna pass.
All right, Troy?
And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Sanctify unto me all the firstborn, whatsoever opened the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and of beast. It is mine. And Moses said unto the people, Remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you from this place. There shall be no leavened bread to be eaten. This day came ye out of the mouth of Levi, and it shall be when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Havarites, and the Jacobites, which he swore unto the fathers to give thee a land flowing with milk and honey, that they shall keep this service in this month.
All right, pause right there. You know, we have kind of a mix of these festivals going on. I'll submit to you that this chapter 13 is an introduction to the Feast of the First Fruits. And the First Fruits, just as the Passover is symbolic of the sacrifice of Christ, and just as the Feast of the Unleavened Bread is a celebration of the perfection of Christ, and it's also a feast, if you will, of dedication to the sanctification process, to the setting apart. The Feast of the First Fruits is an observance of, and it's a foreshadowing of what? We see it here really better than any other place in the Scriptures, what the Feast of the First Fruits is about. And what do we see? The feast, the festival that is to be observed here is basically a dedication to the Lord of the firstborn, and specifically the firstborn male. And why does God bring this about in this circumstance? What is the relevance of dedicating the firstborn?
Well, in Egypt, the firstborn males were killed,
That's right.
and the Israelites were spared.
That's right.
So rightfully, those firstborns belong to Christ,
Exactly.
to God.
That's right.
Heirs.
And so it is symbolic of the resurrection. That which was dead or to die is basically brought back to life and dedicated to the Lord. You see that? Jackie shakes her head no. The last plague was the killing of the firstborn.
Right.
And so by all rights, every firstborn should have died, including
Yes,
the Israelites, right?
yes.
But God spared them. How? Through the
Because
shed
of the
blood of the
blood.
Lamb.
I thought it was because of Jesus, you know, being the firstborn. Remember when they killed all of the little boys?
That's right.
And then they spared because they were trying to kill Jesus, the Messiah. But then I thought it was because the Messiah was a firstborn, God's firstborn. And like that, I never related to the resurrection.
Yeah, well, it is. It obviously, the dedication of the firstborn male, the firstborn male that opens the womb, that is certainly a foreshadowing of Christ. But again, the dedication of the firstborn who should have died and who is now alive,
Oh, okay.
you see,
Okay. Yeah,
it is a foreshadowing of the resurrection of Christ.
Gotcha.
And our resurrection too, for that matter. In other words, that which should have died and deserved to die is brought back to life or is kept in life. Okay, read on. Verse 6. Joanne, you want to read?
I'm gonna pass.
Okay. Kenny?
I'll pass.
All right. Warren. Chapter 13, verse 6.
For something. Here we go. For 7 days eat bread made without yeast, and on the seventh day hold a festival to the Lord.
Pause right there. I don't want to move too quickly over the fact that this feast of the unleavened bread was to last 7 days. And the significance of 7 is what? Completeness. Yeah, completeness. The number 3 is said to be the perfect number from God's perspective. The number 7 is perfection from man's viewpoint. But as Wanda said, we as Christians should be observing the feast of unleavened bread every day. And certainly we come together to celebrate, and that's really what Sunday is. That's really what we're doing today. We're celebrating the unleavened bread, right? We're eating the bread that God has given to us. Just as John said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And then Jesus said, you must eat my flesh. And so that's really what we're doing. When we're studying this Word, we are eating flesh, eating the flesh of Christ, which is the Word, which is the unleavened bread. So that's really what our celebration is about today, and that's what we should celebrate every day. All right, read on.
Eat unleavened bread during these 7 days, nothing with yeast in it to be seen among you, nor shall any yeast be seen anywhere within your borders. On that day tell your son, I do this because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. This observance will be for you like a sign on your hand and a reminder to your forehead that the law of the Lord is to be on your lips. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with his mighty hand. You must keep this ordinance at the appointed time, year after year. After the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites and gives it to you, as he promised on oath to you and your forefathers, you are to give over to the Lord the first offspring of every womb. All the firstborn males of your livestock belong to the Lord. Redeem with every lamb, every firstborn donkey, but if you do not redeem it, break its neck. Redeem every firstborn among your sons.
All right. Pause right there just a second. Let's focus on verse 13 for a second. Let me just reread it, a little bit different translation than what Warren had. But every first offspring of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, but if you do not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And in the same sentence, and every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. I think it's interesting there that the offspring of man is mentioned in the same sentence as the offspring of the donkey. And it says, the first offspring of the donkey you shall redeem it with a lamb, but if you don't redeem it, what do you do with it? You break its neck. In essence, you kill it. It's going to die.
Right.
So you take the donkey, and in the scriptures, how is a donkey portrayed?
Rebellious.
Impure and stubborn, stiff-necked. How often are the children of Israel referred to as stiff-necked? I remember Ishmael is referred to as what?
A wild donkey of a man.
He will be a wild donkey of a man. A donkey is never really spoken of in a positive way, is it? The donkey is obstinate. It does its own thing. It is stiff-necked. God is really comparing the donkey to man.
It's spoken of one good time,
What's that?
when Jesus rode the donkey into baby donkey into town.
Yeah,
Also, when God spoke through the donkey,
yeah.
Balaam.
Balaam donkey. That's right. That's
I was
right.
gonna
He was
say.
using it.
Yeah.
So there are some examples
Well, I've
there.
got a note, it says, because a donkey is an impure animal,
it is redeemed by a pure one, a sheep.
Right.
So Jesus being the sheep and riding the donkey, he overcame the impureness of the sin of man.
That's right. It was the lamb. It was the lamb that rode the donkey. Yeah.
And they always sound like they're laughing when they make a noise.
Yeah. Yeah. But, again, there's tremendous symbolism there. That which is not redeemed by the lamb will die. We all see that. I mean, that's really kind of the story of the New Testament, God's plan of salvation. That which is impure, which is all of us. The donkey, we are all donkeys, one way or another. We must be redeemed. The impure animal must be redeemed by that which is pure. Otherwise, its neck will be broken. It will die. All right, read on.
So, redeem with the lamb every firstborn donkey.
Mm-hmm.
So, redeem with Christ is a redeemer,
That's right.
and we are the donkeys.
That's right. And so the idea is, if you have in your flock, you have a newborn donkey and you have a newborn lamb. And so if you want to keep the donkey, what do you have to do? You have to sacrifice the lamb for the donkey. But if you don't sacrifice the lamb for the donkey, in other words, if you want to keep that lamb, or if you don't have a lamb, then what happens? You got to break the neck of the firstborn donkey. That's right. Why? Because it's stiff-necked, it's impure. It has not been purified by the sacrifice of that which is pure.
Sinful.
That's some deep stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, you ready?
Read on.
In days to come, when your son asks you, what does this mean? Say to him, with a mighty hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let it go, the Lord killed every firstborn in Egypt, both man and animal. This is why I sacrificed to the Lord the first male offspring of every womb and redeemed each of my firstborn sons. And it will be like a sign on your hand and a symbol on your forehead, that the Lord brought us out of Egypt with his mighty hand.
Pause right there. So you can see there that even the children of Israel knew that in the future, when that scene would be played out, the newborn donkey is here and the newborn lamb is right here. There would be occasions when the donkey's neck would be broken and the children would ask, why are you doing that? And there would be occasions when the pure little lamb would be sacrificed, the pure sweet little lamb and this kind of ugly looking donkey. And the lamb would be sacrificed so that the donkey could live, and the children say, why are you doing this? And God says, you tell them the story of how they were delivered from Egypt by the mighty works of God, and how it took the killing of the firstborn to cause Pharaoh to relent and to allow the deliverance to be completed. So there's deep symbolism in all this. All right, Terry, verse 17, please.
When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they may change their minds and return to Egypt.
Pause right there. Let's see if we do have a map here somewhere. All right, so the Israelites were in the land of Goshen, which is in northeast Egypt. All right, the land of Canaan is over here. The nearest part of the land of Canaan to the land of Goshen would be this area right here in the southwest of Israel, which is now called the Gaza Strip, which is inhabited by the Palestinians, who are the modern day equivalent, in my view, of the Philistines. But this is where the Philistines hung out from the beginning of time even till now. And God says, obviously the easiest way would have been just to trace the shoreline of the Mediterranean right up into the promised land. But God says, no, I'm not going to take the children that way. And why not?
Because they were not battle ready.
Exactly. They were not ready. They needed to be prepared. In other words, they needed a wilderness experience. Now, I don't think God intended for them to stay there for 40 years. I think his intent was to teach them. I think he was going to keep them there for probably a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years at the most, but then move them in. But they proved themselves to be even less ready than God hoped they would be, and so they wound up staying there for 40 years. All right, read on, Terry, 18.
So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt, armed for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear an oath. He had said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up with you from this place. After leaving Succoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so they could travel by day or night. Neither pillar of cloud by day or pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people.
So we see, even from the very beginning, even after they were let out, God gave them a sign in heaven as to which way they were to go. So they were never without guidance.
I wish you'd show us with your finger how they really went.
How they really went?
Yeah.
Okay, this is how they really went. They went from here, they went down here, and they went round and round and round and round and round and round for about 40 years. And they moved from place to place. You know, nobody really knows the exact path that they took, but they spent 40 years in this area here. And God just kept them there. Why? Because they...
Until that
So they lost that generation.
died.
That's right. And we'll read later on, we all know the story of why they weren't allowed to go from their brief wilderness experience. Again, I think God intended, you know, for them to stay there a year and a half or so. The reason they didn't is why.
They were stiff-necked people.
They refused.
They
And they
still
sinned.
They still didn't
They
listen to
refused.
God when they sent the spies in.
Well, they didn't listen to God, but they didn't trust God. They didn't trust God to be their deliverer. The spies came back. Joshua and Caleb said, everybody said, hey, this is a great place. It is a land flowing with milk and honey. They even brought back the giant produce from the land. And they said, hey, but there are giants in that land. There are giants, and they're big, and they're powerful, and they're strong. Joshua and Caleb said, if God's on our side, we can take them. What do the other 10 say? No, if we go, they're gonna
They're
whoop
gonna
us.
kill us.
Can you give us comparison to what size land that is here that they're wandering around in and everything?
Yeah.
What size it is?
That's probably just a little bit bigger than the state of Louisiana. Because we know that
All of it?
the land of Canaan, all right, let's see, the land of Canaan is about a fourth the size of Louisiana. All the land of Israel.
Israel.
The nation of Israel today is about 1/4 the size of Louisiana. So if you took that, 1, 2, 3, 4, it'd be just, I think, a little bit bigger than Louisiana, is where they were wandering around. Not a really big place.
From one end of Israel to the other, what is that like? From here to LA? Or?
Well, I can give you an example from Beersheba
Today,
to, well, let's see,
Just Israel. So,
from Beersheba.
Israel.
yeah, Dan would be the top.
Dan was at
upper-
the top of it.
Dan to Beersheba was probably about as far as from Monroe to New Orleans, maybe not even that far.
I don't think it's that far.
Because, well, let's see, I can't give you an example right here. From the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea, that's about 85 miles. Okay, so that's about, this is like Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and this is like I-10, okay? That's all the bigger that is. And so Dan is up around here, and Beersheba is right here. So that would be maybe twice as far, so that would be maybe
Maybe.
170 miles, something like that. So,
But you gotta
not big place.
remember, they were following that, cloud and that pillar of fire, so they
That's right.
just followed it.
That's right, that's right, that's right. And God
That's the
told
only
me,
map they had.
and we're gonna read later on about every time they broke camp, they had to disassemble the tabernacle in a specific way, and specific people had a specific job. They would do it, they'd fold it up, they'd pick it up, and they'd move it out in a certain way. And sometimes they stayed in place for a pretty good long time. Sometimes they didn't stay for very long, and God moved them around.
Maybe that's why the federal government got it running the budget now, right?
I wouldn't equate federal government with God at all. But they were learning, he was teaching them obedience, to follow his direction, and discipline. He was punishing them, telling them they had to learn.
But even more basic than that, the principal lesson was dependence on God. That's the first test that they failed. Because when the spies went into the promised land and they brought their report back, said, yeah, it's everything God told us was. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. It's a wonderful place. But there are giants there. What did God want them to do? To depend upon Him to deliver them from the giants, the same way He delivered them from the Egyptians, right? If God could do it once, He could do it again. And God gave a great example in Egypt. How, look, I will show you how I will deliver you by my mighty hand and my mighty arm. You think I can only do it once? No. He was ready to do it as many times as they needed deliverance, if they would only trust Him and depend upon Him. But they failed the test, and it cost them 40 years.
So what year did they go in, did the spies go in of this 40 years?
The year, I think it was about a year and a half in. That's in Numbers, about Numbers chapter 13, if you want to skip over to there. Somebody can find it for us.
Sounds to me like the United States today.
You're right.
13:26.
Oh, 13.
Yeah. Numbers 13, and what does it say?
It's 26 when they came back. They went in for 40 days to explore the land.
Mm-hmm. Does it say what year it was that they were, how long they'd been in the land? We'll go back and look at that. I think it was about a year and a half that they were there when this happened. But we'll look at that later on.
Look at that.
Okay. All right, let's see, where are we now? Okay, chapter 14. Pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. When Moses was commanded by God and given the instructions to build a tabernacle, one of the elements, one of the fixtures, one of the furnishings of the tabernacle was a reminder of this pillar of fire. What was it? Anybody remember what was inside the tabernacle? When you first walked into it's a big enclosure. When you first walk in, the first thing you encounter is the altar of sacrifice, right? That's on the outside. And then you encounter the brazen laver. And then you go inside the enclosed area, right? And as you walk in, on the left side, you see what?
There's a lampstand.
You see the lampstand. On the right side, you see what?
The showbread.
Table of showbread. And right in front of you see what?
Holy of Holies.
No. Well, you see the veil, but right before the veil, you see what? The altar of incense, remember?
Yeah.
Okay, the smoking, smoldering altar of incense. And it is said, and I believe this to be the case, that the tabernacle was intended to be a reminder to the nation of Israel for all times of what they'd experienced. The altar of sacrifice was the Passover celebration in Egypt. The brazen laver was the Red Sea that they passed through. The enclosure, the holy place and the Holy of Holies, the first place, the holy place was the wilderness experience, in which God guided them by the light. He fed them with the bread, and He brought them to the point of worship with the altar of incense was Mount Sinai, was symbolic of that. And then the veil was, I believe, representative of the Jordan River that they would pass through into, and then the holy place would have been the Promised Land. And what was inside the holy place?
Aaron's staff that budded.
No. What's inside the holy place?
The Holy of Holies?
Well, the Holy of Holies, yeah.
The Ark.
The Ark of the Covenant, that's right.
Right,
The
but
Ark
inside
the Ark of the Covenant would have been the temple, okay? All right, so it was all symbolic of where they had been, where they were, and where they're going. And then, of course, there's the New Testament story that we can follow that too, which would be the altar of sacrifice would be Christ's sacrifice and our first recognition of it. The brazen laver would be our baptism. The entering into the holy place would be the sanctified life, where we learn that Christ is our light to guide us, Christ is the bread of life, and Christ is the incense. He is the place of our covenant relationship. And then when we pass beyond the veil is what? Our death. And the Holy of Holies is heaven, and the Ark of the Covenant is Christ himself. That's, when we encounter God in heaven. So it has tremendous Old Testament significance as well as New Testament significance, and part of which we're given right here. Okay, do we have time to get to chapter 14? Why not? Nancy, you want to read?
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and camp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdal and the sea, in front of Baal-zephon. You shall camp opposite by the sea. Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, they are wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness is closed in on them. I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, so that I will gain glory for myself over Pharaoh and all his army. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." And they did so. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the minds of Pharaoh and his officials were changed toward the people, and they said, "What have we done letting Israel leave our service?" So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 picked chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites who were going out boldly. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, his chariot drivers, and his army. They overtook them camped by the sea.
Pause right there. Now bear in mind that Egypt has the most powerful army in all of the world. And they're chasing down these basically unarmed Israelites who have now been hemmed in they got the water on one side, and they've got Pharaoh's army on the other side. All right, read on, Nancy.
They overtook them camped by the sea, by Pi-hahiroth in front of Baal-zephon. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back, and there were the Egyptians advancing on them. In great fear, the Israelites cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the very thing we told you in Egypt? Let us alone and let us serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness."
Pause right there. Now, can you imagine that? All right, they're complaining, right, as all of us would. They grumble as all of us do, but they're saying, "Moses, we told you when we were over in Egypt, we didn't want to leave. We wanted to stay there, and we wanted to be slaves forever." Not, They were just as eager to go as anybody was, but when they get a little pressure on them, all right, what do? They start lying. They get scared. They start grumbling. They start complaining. What's that?
They want to go back to the old way.
They want to go back, exactly right. They want to go back to the old way. They're not looking forward to what God has planned for them. They want to go back to their old life of slavery of sin. All right, Brother Kenny, pick up from there, verse 13.
Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still."
Pause right there. Mine says you only need to keep silent, to be still. In other words, Moses said it a little bit kinder, I think, than God said it. I think God said, "Just shut up. Stop whining. Stop complaining. Would you just have a little faith in me? Did you not see? Do you not remember what I did before? Don't you remember the 10 plagues? Don't you remember the death angel that came down? Don't you remember how you were miraculously saved? And here you are. I saved you before. You don't think I can do it again?" Stop your grumbling and stop your complaining. Read on.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites may go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen. Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other, so neither went near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He made the wheels of their chariots come off, so they had difficulty driving, and the Egyptians said, "Let's go away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the great power of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant.
So after all this they've seen, they probably never doubted God ever again.
Oh, wow.
And they probably never grumbled again. And they probably never complained. And so I return to the initial question, the questions that I posed early on. The children of Israel, even though they had no reason to fear, they displayed the human emotion that we all display. That is, they feared, they began grumbling, and they began complaining. Think about what we talked about at the beginning. What does it take to reduce you to grumbling and complaining? How much? Does it take somebody threatening your life, or much less? Sometimes it's just things not going my way that causes us to grumble and complain. And then think about this also. How long can you go without grumbling or complaining about something? And I think the lesson we see from this is God says, the Lord will fight for you while you, keep silent. That's a challenge. We have a choice. That when things aren't going our way, the first thing we want to do is grumble or complain. No, God doesn't want us to fill our mouths with grumbling and complaining. He wants us to fill our mouths with the unleavened bread, with His Word, to trust in Him. God says, you can either keep silent and trust me and I'll fight your battle, or if you want to fight your battle, okay, just open your mouth, grumble and complain, and then I'm going to back off. And then when you stop grumbling and complaining and start deciding that you're going to trust in me, then I'll come and fight your battle. But you got to shut up. You got to stop whining. You got to stop complaining. And you got to start depending upon me and trusting me and believing that I have delivered you before. I have the power to deliver you again. And I love you enough that I'll deliver you as many times as you need delivering, as long as what?
You're trusting in me.
You're trusting and you're depending on me.